Hello, I'm Claire, a wild cardigan alongside Rosie, who you'll be hearing from in this episode of the Restore Our Planet podcast. Wildcard is a growing movement of ordinary people across the UK, united around a vision that by using our collective power to reclaim our right to have a say over the way land is managed in the UK, we can challenge the UK's largest landowners to rewild some of their land before it's too late, in order to address the climate and biodiversity crises we face today. Be it Forestry England, the Royal Estate, or the Church Commissioners for England, we confront the vested interests that have control of our land that, as it stands, is unfortunately in a pretty dire state. We still have time to fix it, if action is taken now. So head over to our website at wildcard.land to learn more about our campaigns, and from there you can sign up to our mailing list and find us on social media to stay up to date with what we're up to and find out opportunities that you can get involved in.
Hello and welcome back to Strong Planet Podcast with me, your host Jack Cole. So today I'm joined by Rosie Smart Knight, who is joining us from Wildcard. So first of all, Rosie, thank you for offering us some of your time today. And you start by telling us a little bit about Wildcard itself, its mission, vision, how things got started.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me, Jack. This is really, really exciting. So, Wildcard has been around since 2020, and we were founded during the pandemic when everything was just looking a little bit doom and gloom, and a lot of us had been really involved in climate activism up until that point, and had just got really burnt out with constantly demanding things to stop. So you're just constantly in this like oppositional role, and there's not much sort of like hope and sort of vision for the future that comes out of that, I guess. So over the pandemic, we were doing a lot of thinking and reflecting about how we can continue to be part of this movement that's pushing for a better world, but in a way that's still sustainable for ourselves, because it just gets really, really tiring. And so a lot of us have been doing reading around things like rewilding, which I don't know how much you guys have already spoken about on the podcast, but it's really this idea that nature is an incredible, resilient, and sort of life-fulfilling thing that, if it's given the space, will take back the ability to be healthy and to be a full ecosystem. So rewilding, it sort of moves away from the idea in traditional conservation that humans need to manage habitats in order for things to survive, and actually says, no, humans haven't been in control for the vast majority of life on this planet. Nature is much better at managing these things for itself and finding the right balance. And so it's stepping back and going, okay, well, we're part of this landscape, but we're not the managers of this landscape. So how can we give the space for the land and for the ecosystems to take back control for themselves? So we're getting really excited about this and the idea that humans don't have to be in control of everything, and they also aren't necessarily the solution. So they can be part of the solution, but they're not the full solution. And so that was really exciting, sort of like just like taking us down a peg, I think. But then at the same time, we were reading all about the huge amount of land injustice and inequality that exists in England. So there's two sort of like founding statistics that are at the heart of Wildcard. One is that the UK is one of the most nature depleted countries in the world, which is just so sad. I think we pride ourselves on being a country of nature lovers. We're the country that has David Attenborough, and we love the National Trust, and we love going for walks. And so many of us are so attached to the outside and being in nature. But actually, when we think about what is there, we might be thinking we're in green and pleasant land, but actually it is not even a shadow of what there would have been. And the other thing is that 50% of the land in England is owned by 1% of the population. So not only do we have a really severe crisis in terms of nature, but we've also got this massive land inequality crisis that's going on at the same time. And we went, okay, well, maybe there's a way that we can use these things together and actually start to tackle them both at the same time. So it's horrific that 50% of our country is owned by 1% of the population. It's just totally bonkers. And the majority of these landowners and institutions have held onto land since the Norman conquest. Like, it's just been sort of decades and generations of the land being in the same people's hands. But actually, a lot of these people are also really concerned about how the public perceive them. So you have things like the Church of England, or the Crown Estate, or the Forestry Commission, or the Ministry of Defence, or the Oxbridge Colleges, all of these places that are really institutional landowners and have a huge amount of wealth and a huge amount of power, but they're also very concerned about their public perception. So what Wildcard is doing is it's going, okay, so we have this massive land inequality and we have this nature crisis. Let's use them both together, and let's ask these institutional landowners to rewild their land, and in the process draw attention to the fact that there is such inequality in who has access and who is able to give land back to nature. Because the majority of people that own land in the UK are small scale farmers. They're not people that are going to be able to make decisions that affect entire landscapes. But something like the Forestry Commission is the biggest landowner in the UK and has the chance to sort of completely change the scale of nature restoration. And it's really exciting. So yeah, that's sort of the background and the history of Wildcard.
Yeah, and tell me, whereabouts is the campaign now? What's the sort of day to day, and how is it interacting with each of these different groups?
So Wildcard, our first campaign was the Rewild the Royals campaign. And so that was looking at the royal estates, particularly things like Balmoral and the Crown Estate down in Dartmoor. So asking them to, because obviously Charles is a massive self-professed nature lover, and William as well, and saying, okay, you're saying all of these things, but let's have some action. You have the chance to bring nature back. And so really excitingly, they're now talking about beaver releases, and they're talking about expanding some of their woodland. So there's a lot more to do on that, but that was our first sort of like success, getting these really interesting conversations with the royals. And then from that point, we carried on with the royals, but moved on to specifically the Crown Estate and looking at temperate rainforest in Dartmoor. So I don't know how much you heard about this, but there was a sort of big cultural realization a couple of years ago when we realized that Britain's actually a rainforest nation. And I think most people didn't really know this. I didn't know this at the time. And so we were like, oh, wow, this is so exciting. And yet we've been going on at places like Brazil for years that they aren't protecting their rainforest enough. I'm assuming that's a picture of a rainforest behind you.
In Brazil, yeah.
Yeah. And instead of sort of pointing fingers at other countries, going, well, what's happened to our rainforest in Britain? Like, if we're a rainforest nation, why don't we know, and where's it gone? And a lot of that rainforest is in places like Dartmoor, which is a national park, a lot of it, but the national park is still privately owned. And one of the big landowners there is the Crown Estate. So did a big campaign to get them to bring back their temperate rainforest in their Crown Estate. And they committed to expanding Wistman's Wood, which is sort of the poster child of temperate rainforest in the UK, which is obviously, we called it small potatoes. So it's a start, but yeah, there's a lot more to do there as well. And then the other campaign that we're running alongside the campaign that I'm leading on is the Rewild the Church campaign. So that's looking at the church commissioners. They're sort of this weird secretive body that most people don't really know exist, but they're the investment arm of the Church of England. So you have your day-to-day churches with their churchyards, which are really, most of the time, really biodiverse, and they don't sort of cut the grass in the spring to allow all the wildflowers and support the insects and stuff. And so on a parish level, churches are doing a lot, but the investment arm of the Church of England, they're just, all of their drive is about profit, about maximizing their investments, and there hasn't been much consideration for how much they can do with their land to improve for nature. So they own just over 105,000 acres, which is over the size of the Isle of Wight. I can't remember exactly how much. And so we're asking them to commit to the coming Montreal Protocol, which is the UN protocol that all the countries signed up to, which is that we need to protect at least 30% of our land by 2030. So we're asking the Church of England to do that. And it's very exciting. We've got so much support within the church community. We've got loads of people writing in saying how much they're really moved by the fact that the church on an individual level is really doing a lot, but on a sort of institutional level isn't. So there's big meetings coming up. The church has their own sort of assembly, their parliament, which we're going to be at, which is really exciting. So yeah, lots to watch there as well. And you can find out more about it on our website. And then finally, the last campaign is the one that I'm running, which is the Ghost Woods campaign. And I guess because I'm running it, I'll say, but it's really exciting. And I think one of the most, I don't know, one of the most inspiring campaigns that we've been running recently, because it's all about the ancient woodlands in the UK. So I didn't know much about it before I started researching into the campaign, and someone had come to us and said, I don't know if you've heard about this, but I think we could really do with your help bringing more attention to it. So the UK obviously used to have a lot more woodland than it does now, but we now have is about 1.6% of England is covered in ancient woodland. And ancient woodland is woods that have existed at least since 1600. So these have been here for hundreds and hundreds of years. And over time, you've had all of this beautiful biodiversity that's sort of established itself on all these really delicate ecosystems. You have really rare species of flora and fauna, and you have all these fungal networks and this soil that's been able to take in all of this carbon and keep it there because it hasn't been disturbed, and these really ancient trees, and there's just this whole flourishing ecosystem because it's this land that hasn't been sort of developed and changed drastically by human hands. And I think one of the really beautiful things about it as well is that they're described as these places of living archaeology, because obviously our ancestors have lived in such harmony with the landscape. And so things like coppices or woodworking or producing wood for like smelting or whatever it is, you can go into these woods, you can see those sort of like living relics of the past. And then really, unfortunately, what happened after the Second World War was we were in a massive timber shortage. And so the government decided to make a really drastic decision and chop down around 40% of our ancient woodlands and replace them with really fast-growing conifer plantations. And conifers are great if you're a forester because they grow straight. You can put them in lines and you can sort of guess exactly how much timber you're going to produce over the 70-year cycle that will be planted there. But they are awful if you're part of that ecosystem, because what happens is when the conifers start growing, their pine needles fall to the floor and they acidify the floor and totally change the pH levels within the soil. But also because they're evergreens, they don't let any light down to the forest floor either. So it's been really interesting going into woods knowing this, because it's not something that I'd ever really thought about before. I kind of a wood's a wood and you don't really think much beyond that. But we've got photos where you look and you've got native trees on one side and conifers on the other side, and there's just a line on the forest floor where you've got this sort of like rich, messy green sort of vibrancy of life underneath our native trees, and then it's just nothing. It's just total dry pine needles for a good few centimeters down, and then you get to the soil and there's no bugs, it's just the distinction in the amount of life that it holds is really, really stark. And so what we've got this sort of once in a lifetime opportunity to expand our scale of ancient woodland in the UK from 1.6% to 2.4% by removing these conifers from these plantations and allowing the seeds that still sort of hang on in the soil to come back to life. Because the really exciting thing is we made a massive mistake and we planted all of these timber plantations on top of our sacred, precious ancient woodland, but they're still there, they're still wanting to live. And so you can go in, and if there's a tree that's fallen down, you can see there starts to be like oak saplings planting up inside, and they're really just waiting there for us to sort of give them the chance to breathe again. But we've only got around 50 to 70 years for those seeds to be those seeds are only viable for around 70 years, and so now we're coming up to the plantation cycle, they're just not going to carry on surviving. So what we're asking for Forestry England, which is the biggest land manager in the UK and the manager of our public forest estates, to really speed up their restoration of ancient woodland and really take it seriously, because this is so precious and this is such a fantastic gift that we're going to be able to give to generations, but currently we're squandering it and we're just not doing it fast enough.
Wow, fantastic. And there's clearly a lot of motivation out there because you've recently launched a petition which reached 100,000 signatures in just about 3 weeks. Would you mind telling us about the petition, what its aims are, and why you think there is such a sort of hunger to address these issues?
Yeah, the petition has just been mind-blowing. We've run petitions in the past that have done really, really well. But this petition is, I checked before we came on, and it was 112,000 currently. And it's just, yeah, the amount of support and the messages we're getting in and people telling us about their local woods, which they're really passionate about. And it's just been so, I don't know, really touching to get that support. And I think a lot of it will be because everyone loves their local woods and they love taking their dogs for walks in them, or they remember making dens as kids. But we've also had Dame Judi Dench as the sort of celebrity endorser of the petition, and that has been, yeah, incredible. I think having a national treasure using their voice to support our green spaces is just, it's been a game changer and it's been really, really fantastic.
Brilliant. And you did mention DEFRA, and I was wondering what you think. So DEFRA, along with Forestry England, what could they be doing better? What are some policy ideas that perhaps they should be looking at, or just generally sort of methods, approach? What do you think these two, because obviously they're huge organisations, could be doing better? That might align more so with what you've discussed about sort of the wilding and sort of the general vision for what we should be doing rather than sort of the excessive management that we have been doing for recent decades.
Yeah, I think it's a good question. I think DEFRA, so for people that don't understand the British political system, and I don't necessarily claim to either, but so DEFRA is the Department for the Environment and Agriculture, I believe. I can't remember exactly what the acronym
Rural
means.
affairs, yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Agriculture. So DEFRA is the Department for the Environment and Rural Affairs, and they are the sort of, I don't know, parent body that manage Forestry England. So Forestry England are one of the weird Quango-esque government departments that they are a public manager. So they manage this for the public as a public entity, but sort of under the umbrella of DEFRA. And the really interesting thing is that these ghost woods, which exist on Forestry England land, and they own 105,000 acres, 42,000 hectares of these ghost woods. They also exist on private land, so there's more that are owned in private ownership. And the ones on private land, DEFRA provides funding for the restoration of. So the government have this policy, which is set out in Keepers of Time, that by 2030, all of these ghost woods will have been started to be restored or be restored by 2030. And yet this is just not happening. I think they published a report that last year, no hectares, and I would need to double check this, no hectares have been restored on private ownership. So even in the private sector, this isn't a good picture. But they do provide funding for the restoration of these ghost woods in the private sector. What they don't provide funding for is for the public body, their own sort of like sub organisation to restore these. And Forestry England is having to be predominantly like self-funded. They have to fund themselves through recreational income or through timber sales. And so when they're having to do really difficult and complicated restoration work that isn't going to give them any money, but is going to be hugely beneficial for nature, and the government isn't giving them any funding to do so, they're put in this really difficult situation. And so what we're doing is we're really increasing public awareness of what these ghost woods are, and we're really encouraging people to go out into their woods and have a look and notice that when you look down at the ground, there's a massive difference between the amount of life underneath the conifers and underneath our native trees. And then use that public awareness, which wasn't there before, to go to DEFRA and be like, there are so many people around the country that want this to happen, and you have yourself set out a target that it doesn't look like you're going to be able to meet. This is going to be a massive benefit to nature and to people. Why is it you're not funding your own public organisation to do this really important work? And so there's a sort of dual target that's going on within us, is that we're asking for this funding and we're having to do the public awareness. And then once you've got both of those in place, we can go to Forestry England, who are supposed to be delivering on this, and say, well, now you've got the funding and the public is behind you. How are you going to make sure that this is going to happen in time? Because we're worried that we're going to lose our ancient woodland if you don't restore them quick enough.
Classic. And Rosie, where could we be if we got our act together as a country and society in, say, 10, 15 years? What would you like to see?
On this or in general?
Oh, in general, on this, of course. Specifically our Ghostwoods and the work
Yeah.
that you're focusing on.
I think so. One of the things to say is that, as with so many of these things, this is work that takes years. This isn't something you can chop down a wood overnight, but you can't grow it. It's taken these woods hundreds of years to establish themselves and get this really rich biodiversity of life within their ecosystem. And so we're not looking for these woods to come back overnight. What we're looking for is for them to have the chance to come back. So in 10, 15 years time, I'm hoping that you'll be able to go for walks in woods and you'll see those oak saplings starting to really establish themselves. You'll see the bluebell starting to creep back in again. You'll go for a walk and you might see a lemon slug, which is these really exciting tiny yellow slugs that only exist in the most ancient of our woodlands. And you might see different types of butterflies. There might be purple emperors. There might be this sort of like messy tapestry that you just don't have in the monocultures in the moment. They're tree farms. And so what I really want is for those spaces that have become sort of factory production of timber to go back to being just a total riot of life, I guess. And it's going to look very different in 10 years as it will in 50 years, as it will in 100 years. And I think it will be really exciting to be part of that generation that gets to grow up with those trees. Like, I think thinking of ourselves as a generation that is growing up with ancient woodlands is really exciting, because then we're going to be part of that living archaeology that are sort of people coming, my grandchildren or great grandchildren or whatever, are going to look back and say, oh, I'm so glad that our generation restored them, because otherwise they'll have, what, 1% of the country left with ancient woodland, which would be heartbreaking.
Of course. And finally, where can people find you to support you, your work, donate, and with Wildcard?
Yeah. So Wildcard's on all of your sort of normal social media accounts. It's Wildcard on our website, so it's www.wildcard.land. I would need to double check. Hang on, let me just double check about the
No problem.
social
And I'll make sure that we
media.
put all our links in the show notes and share everything as well. So
Yeah. Sorry, it's just some of them we're slightly.
it's all right.
So it's Wildcard Campaign on Instagram, and it's at Wildcard Rewild on Blue Sky and Twitter.
Lovely.
And yeah, please do check us out and sign the petition if you haven't already. We'd love to see you.
There we go. I'll put all that in the notes, as I say. Rosie, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much, Jack. Lovely to speak to you.